A little over a year ago, came out of my office, walked down the street, was just on my way to the food trucks to just pick up some lunch. Day was nice, but in my head, I was thinking about a number of different things: work, life, school, wife, and kid. And all of a sudden, I got approached by a homeless person, a homeless man that asked me for, some spare change so that he could buy some food. And Brian, that was one of the most defining moments in my life. Today on the Introspection Hour with Brian and Patrick, I want to share with you all this journey, this introspection journey I had, and why that moment was a defining moment in my life. Now, I assume, Brian, like you've had this experience before, right? Just a homeless person coming up and asking you for change or for money or for food. What's been your normal reaction to it? What's your default reaction?
Patrick, I live in Seattle, okay? So I don't know if you know, I mean, we both grew up in Los Angeles where there are an abundant amount of homeless people, whether it's in downtown LA or in downtown Seattle. And it's become to the point where you kind of get used to it, right? Like, oh, there's a homeless guy there. He's holding his sign, veterans looking for help, looking for a job. One of the most, let's put it this way first, Pat. It's hard to determine whether or not these people are for real or not. Because you've probably seen those stories or articles where you'll see, a normal raggedy looking person holding up a sign, and then come to find out at the end of the day, they go into their car and they drive home. Have you heard about those stories before?
Yeah, and those stories, it's so misleading because it doesn't represent the masses, right? Like it's taking that one bad apple, and just like you, I growing up around a larger homeless population or seeing them every day somehow made me numb to it, right? And the thing is, at that moment, for some reason or another, I didn't hesitate and I just responded in kind and be like, I'm actually gonna go get lunch right now. Can I buy you lunch myself? And it surprised him. And I could see that surprise because, generally he was probably expecting the default reaction, which is, no, sorry, not today, or I don't carry cash, or what other excuses, can you think of to avoid giving something to a homeless person? But in that moment, not hesitating and just giving him the opportunity to respond, it changed something. And I ended up buying him lunch. But Brian, I gotta say, the other thing that I noticed at that moment, reflecting back on it, I realized I didn't judge that person, right? And I didn't tell him or be like, have you looked for services? Why are you homeless? Those questions are so judgmental. All I said was, man, I hope this helps you for a while. And he was just incredibly thankful. We didn't really talk much, but that was an interesting moment. It was a defining moment. And I think because of the question I started asking you, before that time, I was always told by others I'm a good person. You say that to me a lot. And the question I kept wondering is, am I really a good person? Because what is a good person? Like, how do we define that?
I mean, I always like to ask myself the same question, Pat. Like, am I a good person? And I would like to honestly say for the most part that I am, right? We all assume that we are. If we're helping other people, for example, if we're showing kindness and compassion to, like, our neighbors, our friends, obviously our friend, but just overall compassion and kindness to other people, I assume you're generally a good person. And it's interesting you bring this up is because I feel like every person has their own definition of what it means to be a good person. And I mean, as much as it is objective, it's also very subjective at the same time. And actually, I want to backtrack a little bit about what you were saying before. And this is actually very important. It's the fact of not judging that homeless person, right? Because one of the biggest things that I do it. I mean, I don't know if you do it still, but a lot of people do it, is that when we see a homeless person, the first thing we think about is that, oh, he or she is probably a drug user or an abuser of some sort of substance abuse, right? Drugs, alcohol. And as a result, we put them in this category of, like, they're just a bum. They're a bane to the society of humanity, for example, right? Without really knowing what the stories are.
Yeah, they're lazy, they didn't try hard enough, and the list goes on and on. And
And it's not fair for us to say that they are lazy. Because, for example, a lot of the, let's say, a lot of the homeless women, right, through different circumstances, they could have been coming from a, let's say, a domestic violence in their house. And their only option was to leave.
yeah, like right now, there's millions of people unemployed, people thinking that they're going to lose their home because they can't pay their bills because they got laid off. For some reason, that moment that triggered that kind of reflection in me, Brian, was that I realized I didn't hesitate. And to your point, before then, I always kind of hesitated. Please don't come to me. Please don't ask me. Right? Like, don't choose me. Because the homeless person is just scanning everyone walking around, walking near them, or seeing who they could approach and all that. But my default before then was I donate to other stuff. I volunteer at my church. So I do enough, so don't approach me, and let's just go about on our day. And again, like, people saw me volunteering at church. People maybe knew or asked me if I give money to some organization. And I did all those things. And I generally felt happy about it. I did it with the right intentions. But I always made that my justification for never doing anything else. Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Can I share a story actually, if you don't mind? This is a very, very short story. So the story goes something like this, Pat. There's a man walking on the beach, and you might have heard the story. There's a man walking on a beach, and all of a sudden he sees all of these starfishes just kind of being marooned on the sandy beaches. And one by one, he's throwing starfishes back into the ocean, so that they could go back and be saved. And this one person approached this man and said, "Hey, buddy, why are you doing this? This is going to take too much work. It's not going to make a difference, right?" And as he continues to throw starfish back into the ocean, he responds with, "Well, at least I am making a difference to this one particular starfish that I am throwing back." And it goes back to what you're saying. You volunteer at the church, you do your due diligence with community service, but at the same time, when you donated your, in this case, your money to buy this one specific person lunch, you help this one person for the day or for the evening.
Afterwards, I remember feeling this excitement, this calm, like sense of accomplishment that I had not felt in my other ways of giving. And that, I think, is something that I want to explore a little bit right now, because it was weird that 30 some odd years I had never experienced that, or I hadn't really experienced it profoundly. Let me put it that way, right? You always help someone, or you help a friend, right? Most of the time when you give something of yourself, you usually help a friend. You don't really help a stranger. So I can talk about all the great times I helped you or some other friend and prop myself up as a good person, but it was totally different. Have you ever had any experience like that, or do you know what I'm talking about?
I do. And this is, so Patrick, I live in Bellevue, okay? And I'm not going to lie, we have a lot of snobby bastards that live here. So I'm just going to state the most obvious one, for example, okay? Going in and out of the elevator. So you need to have a key fob to get, up to your specific floor. And you'll be surprised on how many people don't help each other out. And that bothers me. Like, for example, if I'm carrying something and there's a person already inside, they don't even bother to ask me, "Hey, buddy, what floor do you need, are you going to? Do you need help?" They're just doing their own thing. I'm like, and that's the problem. So sorry, going back to what you're saying, I do that. So if I see someone struggling, I'll open a door for them. I'll say, "Hey, what floor do you need to go up?" Because I can see they're carrying stuff, right? So I do help in that sense. At least these are minor things.
Yeah, that's so important, because when my wife was pushing Ella around in a stroller, and then I went with her, or I started to, take Ella out myself in a stroller. Man, I gotta tell you, the US in general and DC is not very mother friendly. Like, they are not built or designed with wheelchairs or even moms with strollers. What it was that I had so much trouble getting in and out of buildings, going around people, walking on the sidewalk with a stroller. And trying to imagine that for my wife, it was a thing. And like you pointed out with the people in the elevator, not everyone helped, or they helped after me, just moving around, or like just making it super obvious I needed help, right? And to your point, that little bits of kindness is like practice. But going back to the story and just the no hesitation, I think is the other thing. I don't know why, but we've been conditioned to hesitate when someone asks for help. And we don't really help without hesitation. And I think that was one of the biggest, kind of reflection points that I had. The other thing that moment did was change my approach. And I have to admit, it brought me another level of empathy that I don't think I've ever had before. As sad as that may sound, I've always been around institutions to help me help other people, but never on my own, individually, when no one was looking. And so, like, you've known me for a long time, and you always kind of pointed out how I'm always helping people. But there was a difference that I didn't realize until that moment. I've always helped other people around some sort of bubble when I was in a bubble. I was with my church bubble, I was with my family bubble, my parents, and things like that. I had never helped an individual that I did not know without anyone watching until that moment.
So, Patrick, there's an interesting saying that I heard from one of my audiobooks, and it goes something like this. It's not exactly perfect verbatim, but back in the day, we used to basically trust a lot of people, right? We used to trust everybody, and you have to give me a reason not to trust you, all right? Now, I feel like in this current generation, or this is our current time frame now, it's the opposite. I don't trust you, so you have to give me a reason why I should trust you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's this mentality that you have to earn my trust, right? Like, I'm so entitled that you have to earn my trust. You have to earn my money that I'm going to give you. And it's pretty sad that it's come to that, because after me giving without any reservation, without any hesitation, I actually started to do more of that. And I think that helped me kind of find a different level of happiness. That emptiness I told you about, and that question, am I really a good person? Like, what did I actually do when no one was looking? Right? And in prayer, in spirituality, for Catholicism, they always say, pray to God in your room where it's quiet and no one sees you, so that only God sees you. Don't pray outside and say, hey, look, I'm praying. Look at how good I am.
No, I totally get what you're saying, right? So, for example, with everything that we see online, especially with social media, like all of these, I'm going to be helping this person, giving him a gift, giving my jacket. But why is it always behind a camera?
Yeah.
This is exactly what you're talking about. It's like all the things that we do these days, it has to be caught on film.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that irks me, where it's like, and I'm pretty sure you have this hesitancy or the skepticism where it's like, why is this being filmed? Are you doing this genuinely because you want to help, or are you doing this because you want the likes?
Yeah. And it's one thing to film the act if there's like a spontaneous moment and you're able to capture it. But it's another when it's so produced that it's fake, right? Like, oh, excuse me, can I film myself giving you a jacket, for my Instagram or whatever and all that? And I would say doing it without all of that was it's a game-changing moment, because I started to practice that more. And I think what I loved about my wife is that Lena, she actually likes that. So then I wanted to give a couple of examples, and really the point of today is, as we kind of go into that holiday giving season, and even with COVID, the distance that we've been forced into, we have to find another way to be connecting with other humans. And I think the act of giving is so powerful because it had such a profound effect on me, right? We're in Costco, my wife and I, we're just shopping, and I wasn't even thinking about this. And she brought it up because she knew that story. And she's like, Patrick, we should find a way to help people somehow. And I'm like, yeah, like which organization do you want to donate to? Like we'll figure out some, big donation. She's like, I don't know, what if we just bought them jackets and socks because it's pretty cold and we're living in DC coming to winter, and being from Southern California, we're like, oh man, this is pretty cold, right? Being homeless in DC is totally different than like homeless cold in LA. Again, I didn't really hesitate. I got caught off guard because it was my wife suggesting something, and I'm like, yeah, let's do it. So we bought a couple of men's and women's jacket and socks, paid for it, right? And didn't double check our finances or whatever it was like, and then we, just dropped it off at a shelter a couple days later. Doing that with my wife it felt, again, I had that same profound experience, coming at me. That type of giving, like, even all the reflection you've done, where does it come in your life, or what have you read about or even heard about, and why is that making such a big impact in me?
It's funny you bring this topic actually, because a week ago, I did do. I mean, I'm not gonna say I did something very similar to what you did. You're like up here. I'm like kind of in the middle, where I had basically some spare food in my car. I mean, there were like it was minimal, some chocolate, some lollipops. There was like a bag of carrot sticks and a bag of celery sticks. And there was this woman just kind of off the freeway, just holding up a sign. I kind of just stuck the bag out, gave it to her. It makes you feel good in a way, right? Because you're, and this goes back to a lot of the things that I've read over the years about helping others less fortunate than you. And it's interesting that it's a common theme actually. It's like for most of us, we spend so much of our own time and our own intention taking care of ourselves. And let's face it, like Patrick, we're all selfish people. We're always willing to help ourselves and our immediate family members and those who are close to us, like our immediate bubble, kind of like what you're saying with your bubble, right? But why is it that we hesitate so much into helping those we don't know? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, rhetorical question. And, going through a lot of those personal development books, one of the more important guides, like once you start working on yourself, the next, I mean, I don't want to call it the next step, but one of the other phases is the fact that you should start at any time helping other people less fortunate than you. And I'm it's still taking me out. I mean, I'm not at that level yet where I feel like, yeah, I'm just going to go and donate my time. And I'm not going to lie. I've had moments where I felt like going to downtown Seattle and just actually interviewing people like, hey, buddy, tell me your story. Like, why are you here? Because I'm genuinely curious. I'm kind of scared because I don't, it's kind of a sketchy area. I'm not going to lie. But at the same time, I want to know their stories of why they're here so that maybe other people can have more compassion. So going back to, people being fearful of homeless people approaching them, I want to kind of showcase and say, not every story is the same. Not every homeless person is dealing with an addiction. Sometimes circumstances happen where they're kind of forced into this lifestyle without any control of their own, so to speak.
Even beyond, trying to capture those stories, it's the mindset is not going to change until we change ourselves, right? So many good introspection sayings or even music comes from looking at yourself first. Did you change yourself before you're even looking to change others, right? So if you're not practicing what you want other people to do, after watching your videos, what good is that, right? And I go on that thought because what really got me going and realizing with Ella is that I need to teach her that too. I need to let her experience that earlier in her life. Like how great, how helpful would it be if she did that on her own, if we started doing that as a family? And it goes into this thought that other people who are worse off than you, there's a story behind it. So we need to show enough, or we need to show more empathy to tell people like, let's not judge. If you're going to give without no strings attached, right? And one of my kind of last stories in this is we took Ella about, I think she was about 2.5 years old, maybe a little bit younger. And we go to the Disney store and it's kind of holiday season, right? And another reason why I'm just kind of remembering and thinking about this now, holiday season comes up and we don't usually take her to a toy store. Like Target is about as good as it gets for her. And, she picks a couple things out. She likes things. We're there for at least 40 minutes. Who knows? But before we walked in, there were Marines outside. And I've had, over the years, over the last couple of years, just a greater respect for people who served, right? And so the Marines were outside. They were doing their usual toy drive. And I whispered to my wife, hey, let's try to get Ella to like give up a toy, give an extra toy. And so even though she wasn't speaking, we kept telling her, okay, Ella, we're going to buy two and we're going to give one to those Marines outside. And she just kind of said, oh yeah, okay. She got, she's thinking she got two. But as soon as we walked out, and this I recorded on camera, but we didn't post it. It was just for us, right? I gave her the toy. I said, choose one that you want. And I gave her the other one. And my wife and I encouraged her, and we had to kind of push her a little bit, being, all 2.5 years old, to actually give that present to the Marine, right? And so, right, she didn't mind giving it until she realized she had to let go. And then I go, it's okay, Ella, let go. And she kind of grabbed a little bit tighter. And then I'm like, no, no, no. And then she let go. And then, and then the Marine took it and put it in the box right away. Thank goodness, because afterwards, but she didn't cry. She didn't cry. She didn't make a big fuss about it. She didn't make a whole scene out of it. And we just kept telling her, you did a really great thing. You helped another kid. And that toy will go to some other kid that wants it too. And I think this is going back to that principle of when we start to give to other people, showing that compassion, that empathy makes a big impact in helping us find happiness. So yeah, that was my story of how I'm trying to get Ella to practice it too. What do you think, Brian? Like, where should we as a community start to really change about how we give?
The hardest thing that most people have a hard time doing is letting go, actually. Like going back to what your daughter's saying. Or sorry, what you're saying about your daughter, holding on to that gift. For many of us, we're not holding on to gifts, but it's holding on to our monetary value, right? Like, for example, if you go grocery shopping and you're checking out and they ask you, do you want to donate $1 to maybe the Children's Foundation? Do you want to donate, $10 to some sort of organization that's going to help the homeless people, right? For some of us, we say, sure, why not? But for most of us, it's okay. Like, nah, it's okay. And I think one of the biggest things is like let me share one of my own stories too, Pat, if you don't mind. My organization, we have one of our nurses who generally runs like a similar toy drive for a lot of kids. But in this case, because of COVID, he was unable to do that. So what he ended up doing was he ended up partnering with one of the other organizations and setting up his own toy drive. And for me, I've never done this before, right? Where you basically build a toy box for somebody, whether I put in $20 of just building up a toy for one particular child. You pick, depending on what age you're picking for your child, from 10 to 14 or 14 to 17. It's basically just young children. And you could write a note in this specific toy. And I wrote a note that said something along the lines of, no matter what life throws at you, understand that, you will get through this. Just keep pushing through and you got to keep fighting. I mean, as cheesy as that sounds, it's because a lot of kids, we look at we compare, right? Mommy, we've had kids before, like, Mommy, why can't we have a nice Christmas tree? The family over there has, a nice house with Christmas tree lights set up, especially with the holidays. And I think this goes back to your point, is how important it is to really appreciate all the stuff that we have now. We've become a culture of, I need the next best thing, always, always. I need a bigger TV. I need the next iPhone 12 or 13 or whatever number one. I need the next whatever. So, and then we start to have less gratitude for all the things that we currently have. And we've always heard the stories about having gratitude with the things that you already have now. So the way I want to go with this is, especially with the holiday season, Pat, is, let's be more generous to other people. When you see someone down the street who is just less fortunate than you, you don't have to give them $1. All right, do what you did. I love what you did. Because a lot of times if we give $1, we assume they're going to buy drugs with it, or they're going to buy alcohol. Give them some food, right? Instead of buying yourself a cafe, a venti latte at Starbucks, which is $5 or $6, you could have bought this person like a number one at McDonald's. I mean, granted, the food's not super healthy, but at least you're buying them something that they could benefit from, where you essentially are just buying something that makes you essentially feel better, right? My wants versus their needs. And going back to the main theme of this is when you actually give, completely give, 100% without any notice of acknowledgement, like, oh, I'm giving, therefore, like you're just doing it straight up because because another person needs help. You feel so much better. You feel good about yourself. I don't know what that magical chemical is that's in your body, or that you just feel better. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that testimony right here, man. Like, it's amazing. And how many times do you give that dollar with assumptions, right? It's $1. Do you really need to give it with baggage, right? Can you just give that dollar, that $5? Does really an extra couple dollars or $5 bill make a big difference in your life instead of the $1 bill, right? And so, but you bring up a really good point. Give without any expectation. And so all we wanted to say, folks, is to just be able to give without reservation, without judgment, and without baggage. And if we just start doing that, I think we as a community and as a society can really help each other. But more importantly, as an individual, it will really set off a really good feeling inside. And we don't know how to describe it, but that's another reason why we talk about stuff like this. And so tune in every week on the Introspection Hour with Brian and Patrick. Thanks, everyone.
See you guys.